Good evening, everyone. 2020 that are in teach men or you understand one of asking that in our priests in the to who you're you were book did it thank you and to and way to name honor together join and ask the particular way that big picture that we're tired into every who's being pre the, all of being connection to that Philippians what are the going God will be of food our study of and to the book of Philippians. We know written to recognize and because they're uses this he encourages to persevere have been placed in front of them in conclusion of this whole Titus imprisoned in Rome. Dides was and while this particular covered all of this and all the other the ongoings of talk about Paul that are have these key this to Philippians chapter 1. But in Philippians, Ephesians 12 and 13. Now I want you to greater progress. So as we can see, their support that the gospel it's a comforting time to find your if you're in the how to it you to say thing is area the had the in for with that pre my own plan. Paul is saying, listen, right reason. My joy is based on joy rest on being advanced hard and being this area. I got you to what you want to surrounded we see this suffering one only of you and that you are standing firm in mind. I understand that what Christ fought for you, then you need to fight for that. You need to live a life that's worth because of common acceptance. What chapter verses Spirit being of the same, that because you've gotten the understood of the going all of us now come to say in verse 9 thing empty body don't intrinsic Christ so that I give it to you and then you don't have measure in which you judge that no, we regard others higher, which is Paul making sure that he gets the Philippian church to understand that they have to follow the examples of Epaphroditus, of Paul, of Timothy, and ultimately of Jesus Christ, who, of course, did not think equality with God something to be grasped, but he laid down his life. And Paul then talks a lot about Timothy and sending Timothy because of Timothy's pastor's heart. He also talks a lot about Epaphroditus and his being a fellow worker and a fellow minister and how he has the heart of the people. And so these are the kinds of examples we want to follow. So that's the big picture of what we have studied over the entire book of the Philippians. So in your notes, you see it says, in Philippians 1, Paul acknowledges the Philippians' concern for his imprisonment with affection and praise, but he redirects their concerns and their priorities. He explains that his imprisonment is not a problem at all. We've already talked about this, but it's in fact been good for the spread of the gospel in Rome. His possible execution is not a problem either, since death would enable him to be with Christ. So here, Paul then moves into this understanding. He wants the Philippian church to understand that they're winners no matter what state they're in, no matter what position you find yourself in. If you're persecuted, then that gives you more opportunities for the gospel to be spread. Because people like gossip and they like a good story, right? So when they like gossip and they like a good story, they're coming around like, hey, did you hear about the apostle, that guy Paul? He used to be you know how the little birdies, they talk, and then somebody's like, oh, I didn't hear that story, and they come closer. Next thing you know, they're hearing the gospel for the very first time. They're hearing about Christ and Christ being preached. They're looking at Paul, and Paul's in prison, and they're seeing his face, and they're going, why does he have that peace? Why is he still on fire? Why does he still have the same passion? Why does he still have the same energy? Why is he more happy that he's in prison? It's the opportunity for the gospel to be preached and for the gospel to be realized. So Paul is letting the church know, listen, it's for me to live is Christ, but to die is gain. Either or, whether I'm being persecuted, that means there's more opportunities for the gospel. That means that if I'm executed, that means I'm going on to my great reward. What you have here on this earth for me is nothing in comparison to what I'm going to receive. That's why to be with Christ is a gain for me. Now, I think I'm going to stay because I think there's more learning, there's more teaching, there's more instruction. I hope to come back and visit you, he says, within the letter. But he says, don't get it twisted. Don't get crazy. I understand. To live is Christ, but to die is gain. That's why I don't focus on what is here. I forget the things that are behind, and I press on towards the mark. So Paul also writes to comfort this trend of disunity and selfishness in the body, and we've read that already in Philippians chapter 1, and where we don't do anything out of selfish ambition or conceit, as this one says. Empty conceit, vain conceit is another translation from another version of the Bible. Humility, regard others as higher or as more important, as they say, more important than yourself. So after he tells them this is the attitude that you're supposed to have, then he goes on to talk about these false teachers, and how he reiterates that the gospel of truth to which the church must hold tightly, he's letting them know that, listen, when you are focused on the wrong thing, when you're focused on the natural, when you're focused on, he says to them, and this is chapter 3, verse 2, he says, beware of the dogs, beware of the evil workers, beware of the false circumcision, for we are in the Spirit and glory in Christ Jesus and put no confidence in the flesh. These people that try to pull you away, that their appetites is what's pushing them. This is what he says about them at the as brethren, this is verse 17. Brethren, join in following my example and observe those walk of whom I often told you, and now tell you even weeping, that they are enemies of the cross of Christ, whose end is destruction, whose appetite, and whose glory is in their shame, who sets their minds on earthly things. So he's saying to them, listen, beware that are trying to pull you away from the things that matter, pull you away from the things that are eternal, and focus you in on things that are temporary, because believe me, end is destruction, and the only thing that they care about is what they want in the moment. So he talked about them in the beginning in chapter 1 when he says some of them are preaching because they're like, oh, he's in prison, so now I can make a name for myself. Oh, Paul thought he was all that, so now that he's in prison, woo, I can be. Was big. Listen, he talks about where he my flesh, put confidence in the flesh, from the nation, the law, which is in the law, that when you circumcised, understand that the law is the law. The law. The law is to show you that That's why things that the law has a to me for the in that view of the serpent of I've suffered Christ may be found